And a giant, giant welcome to all parents, students, mentors, partners, as well as the Lumiere team members who've been excitedly supporting you along this crazy journey. It's been an amazing cohort in many different ways. If we could go to the next slide, it's really been a historic cohort. So we've had students from 20 different countries across 3 different continents participate, 4 different continents actually, ranging from places like the United States and Canada, all the way to Swaziland and Kenya, to Turkey and Russia. We've had students who've been studying everything from anthropology and economics all the way through to particle physics and machine learning. And it's been amazing to see all of you face the challenges that are involved in research, face the difficulty of that blank, blinking Google sheet, and somehow put words down and successfully make it through to the end. It's an incredible journey, and you should all be proud of yourself. This is also a historic cohort because financial aid has been an important part of what we do at Lumiere ever since we first started. And we've had, we've given out tens of thousands of dollars of financial aid in the cohorts up till now. But this winter, for the first time, we launched a foundation, which is a nonprofit associated with Lumiere Education, through which we are aiming over the course of the next few years to reach at least 1,000 students who can do the Lumiere program entirely free. This winter, the first cohort of the foundation is graduating. So a special shout out and congratulations to all the students and mentors who are involved in making that happen. And finally, this cohort is also historic because, as you know, we have a number of different amazing speakers who've spoken to students before. These speakers include Nobel laureates, professors at Harvard University, incredible entrepreneurs and CEOs. And for the first time this time around, we are having a student speaker. So thank you so much, Albina, for speaking, and we're excited to hear from you in a second. Before we dive into that, congratulations once again to everyone for graduating. This is the list of students that are graduating this cohort. Congratulations again on all of your work. Well done. And without any further ado, I will pass it to Albina, a member of our 2024 on a paper in education. And we're super excited to hear from you, Albina. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Dear Lumiere program faculty, mentors, program managers, publication strategy associates, fellow students, welcome. My name is Albina Hisamudinova, and through the past few weeks, I've been researching students' motivation to pursue higher education with the help of fantastic mentor Anna and Angelia. But enough about me. Everybody wants to know what we would do if we didn't successfully conduct our research. I guess we never know. Every day, finishing 5 cups of coffee, we sat down to check the Google documents sent by our favorite mentors. So 100 new comments there and went to brew the 6th cup of coffee. We spent hours reviewing literature, trying to keep the flow between paragraphs and chapters, conducting interviews and experiments. We attended seminars, workshops, passed tests, and always filled out the student update form. We served the expanses of the world, touching on completely different spheres from art to science, and then forced ourselves to write about it in academic English for 30 pages, rewarding ourselves with a chocolate bar. Every day, we reflected on our progress, and it motivated us to continue. We did it because we are dreamers, conquerors, and most importantly, researchers. Fellow students, each of us has been a researcher since childhood. Throughout our lives, we have explored the sky, snow, animals, birds, our aspiration, and this world as a whole. Of course, that is something to be proud of. But as we reflect on our journey we have traveled together, we can be truly grateful to Lumiere for making us real researchers, guiding us on the fascinating path of our passions, showing us that Our ideas are important, and we are heard. We have been truly privileged to work and learn from the best. Our journey into research is just beginning. Now we have skills, critical thinking, knowledge, expertise, and connections necessary to impact any industry which is truly important for us and for the world. As we move forward, I encourage each of us to take advantage of opportunities, give ourselves entirely to the work we love, try, fall, and get up again. We are a new generation of researchers. We enter the world with our souls wide open, determined to make changes and having solutions to the world problems in our hands. And we definitely don't plan to give up, right? Let's celebrate our achievements and look forward to opening a new chapter in our lives, confident and ready to take on any challenge. After all, now we can officially bear the title of researcher. I'm happy to announce that today we have the opportunity to get a glimpse of some of the research projects my fellow researchers have developed. So sit back and get ready to be amazed. Over to the Lumery Scholars 2022 Winter Cohort.
Thank you so much, Albina, for that. I think, like I've said before, and like I'll say again, that I absolutely loved the speech. And I think it brought just not only like memories of your graduation, but also like when we've all graduated from school as well. So thank you so much for helping us do exactly that. Like you said, we have a list and we have some of our students presenting today at our symposium. And to start us off and to give us a little insight about cybersecurity, we have Leo Lee.
Thank you very much for having me today. For my presentation, first of all, I'd like to thank my supervisor, Dr. Merab Tai, who has been putting up with me for the last 3 months. And also thank you, Lumir, for providing me the research position and opportunity to do this. It's very rare to have this opportunity. And once again, I thank you, everyone involved. And the research question that I'll be dealing with today is the principle of distinction in international humanitarian law, and especially the use of cyber attacks on dual-use infrastructure. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so what exactly is dual-use infrastructure? Well, with the development of cyber technology, or the information age, as scholars call it, there's a kind of interlinkage between civilian and military assets. So there's like an increasing difficulty of differentiating between what is civilian target and what is a military target. And how can we target these military systems when so many of them are integrated within our civilian systems, such as our telephone systems, our satellites, or even like the way we use the internet? These technologies are very much interconnected, and we call them the dual-use infrastructure. And when we concern ourselves with the legal question of what systems can actually be attacked during a warfare, there are like these very interesting legal dilemmas and problems, especially in the development of cyber technology, when states can infiltrate these interconnected systems and attack civilian infrastructure through the guise of attacking military networks. It becomes very difficult for law, and especially the principle of distinction in international humanitarian law, where the law is used to regulate state conduct during an armed conflict. Thus, with the opportunity from Lumir, I endeavored myself to kind of find out in what circumstances or situations can states or state-induced actors use cyber attacks to attack these interconnected systems. And I suppose this draws on the very foundation of what is a civilian object and what is a military object. And of course, scholars have different viewpoints on how we can differentiate and how we can draw the line. And with the opportunity from Lumir, I have tried to draw this line. Yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. And the research methodology that I'll be using will be in 2 parts. The most obvious way of doing it in law is the doctrinal analysis, where I'll be looking at existing legislation and treaty bodies. And the 2 most useful ones are the additional protocols and the Geneva Conventions. And these 2 kind of treaties form up what we call the international humanitarian law that regulates armed conduct. And Second of all, I'll be using the case study method, where I'll be looking at different case studies, such as the Stuxnet incident and a range of cyber attack scenarios, such as even the Russian-Ukraine conflict, where we can consider whether the attack itself or whether the targets that are attacked can be considered a military object or a civilian object. So I'll be defining the threshold of what exactly is an attack in the international humanitarian law, and whether the concept of a cyber attack itself can be considered an attack that falls under the general ambit of the IHL. And the second level of that is determining whether cyber attacks are actually legitimate under the principle of distinction, and whether they can attack, what we call as civilian or military objects. And scholars have recently really contended on whether civilian and military objects should be differentiated, given that they could be non-lethal. As you can see later, are really strongly argued against this. Yeah. Next slide, please. Thank you. And one of the main findings from my extensive research over the past 3 months is that the principle of distinction is very appropriate to guide states on ascertaining what is a legitimate target for cyber attack. And this is characterized by two major kind of things. First of all is the effective contribution, and second of all is the definite advantage, quoting from the existing legislation. And while some scholars argue that these two aspects are very much repetitive or that they're too broad in a sense, I argue against this very notion, and I claim that states can justify a direct link between what is an effective contribution to dual-use infrastructure and how military advantages can be gained from that act of a cyber attack. And thus, with this direct establishment of a link, we can allow states to do that in an armed conflict. However, the question of cyber attacks really comes to highlight the applicability of whether the distinction principle can be applied to dual-use infrastructure. And given that there's a kind of unsettled conclusion of what exactly is a dual-use infrastructure, I suggest states or international legal regimes or the UN can come to clarify what is a civilian infrastructure distinctively from a military infrastructure. So we can all come into a conclusion and come with a consensus on how we can legally attack different objects during an armed conflict. And we can establish a unifying standard between states in their attacks and in their conflicts, and making sure that it's done in an ethical manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Leo, for that. I think it's amazing how you've thought through the entire process from problem to solution, and you've really provided a solution that a lot of people can think about and even really cause a debate around that as well. So thank you so much for doing that. And next we have Somali, who's going to talk to us about children and their disabilities.
Hi, I'm Somali Shinathola, and with my mentor Betula Raganchi, I'm studying how the time spent teaching in ASL impacts the English proficiency of children with disabilities. So this research will be zooming into specific disabilities, which are going to be autism, dyslexia, and deafness, and focusing on these specific disabilities allowed for a far more intricate research and understanding of each category. So according to Friel, a psychologist, ASL doesn't work as a form of teaching English, especially English writing. The issue with teaching in ASL is the grammar, as ASL can't teach English grammar and is instead used as a method of communication. However, in Mounty and his colleagues' study, there wasn't a correlation between ASL and English reading skills in some cases, while in other cases there has been shown a strong correlation. And in a study by Shield and his partners, ASL might even harm the children as well if they develop ASL as a first language, leading to negative consequences in their academics and vocational successes. This leads to another important factor, having deaf parents versus having hearing parents. Children who learn ASL as a first language due to having parents who are deaf have been shown to do better in their English reading questions than children who haven't learned ASL at an earlier age due to having parents who can hear. This study concluded that ASL doesn't hinder the ability to read English, but instead helps to learn it. And another study claims ASL being taught as a first language for children who have deaf parents does not play a factor in changing the ability of the child to learn English, strongly contradicting the previous research. In order to resolve this debate, I've taken upon this research question. And my first methodology was a case study that I utilized for my literature review. This generated qualitative research as I collected various studies with contrasting perspectives to develop the experiment and understand the background of the topic. The other methodology I will be using is a field experiment to observe the natural setting of the classroom, and students suffering with autism, dyslexia, and deafness will be divided into two groups, a control group and an experimental group. And both groups will be taught a lesson in English language. And the lesson will be approximately an hour long, and the control group will learn the lesson in English while the experimental group will be taught in ASL. And once the lesson is complete, both groups will receive an identical pop quiz on the material. And the entirety of the pop quiz will be constructed by classical multiple choice questions, including a set of questions to open-ended responses that will gather additional information, such as whether they have deaf parents or hearing parents. And of course, this section will be completely optional, and the participants will be anonymous to follow IRB regulations. So although my research didn't consist of performing the actual experiment due to limited time, I was able to hypothesize the expected results. And I was able to hypothesize that there will be a general positive correlation between the average number of correct answers on the pop quiz and the time spent teaching in ASL. Specifically, though, among the categories selected for this study, which are again autism, dyslexia, and deafness, there might be slight differences. And this expected result will be based on the case studies that I've gathered from my literature review. And based on that, I was able to generate some expected results on what, like if my experiment was performed, how the results might have been. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Somali, for sharing. I think it's amazing how you've really thought through this in depth, where you've mentioned how autism, dyslexia, and deafness can really have different results. And I'm excited to see if this is something that you will still pursue in future and see if you can actually get those results and share back with us as well. So thank you, Somali, for sharing. Next, we have May, who is going to talk to us about different proteins and how their treatment in chronic hepatitis is. May, over to you.
Hi. Sorry. Hi, everyone. It's May or Chi. So me and my mentor, Christopher, have been conducting a research to answer the question that whether an RNA interference can be used to target expression of HBV polymerase protein as an approach to treat both acute and chronic hepatitis B infection. So you wonder what is hepatitis B infection? It's a common but very serious liver disease that is super relevant in the Eastern Pacific or African regions that leads to detrimental health problems like liver failure, cirrhosis, or liver cancer that there hasn't been a final cure for. Though there are FDA-approved available treatments that are interferons and analog nucleotide, but it's shown to present with short-term usage, severe side effects, and also the HBV drug resistance. So HBV is the virus that causes acute and chronic hepatitis B infection. And so we're aiming to target the HBV polymerase, which is a polymerase enzyme that assists HBV in converting viral RNA through reverse transcription into viral DNA, which replicate the more HBV in human cells. So the method we're using is RNA interference, which is it's a molecular technique that using small interfering RNA, you can call it siRNA, to bind with the target HBV mRNA sequence to inhibit and silence the function of the polymerase gene in producing more protein. Okay, so the method that we're using is the online tools, which is first is data search. We're using the NCBI gene bank to obtain the polymerase gene. Then we generate a reverse complement of the RNA sequence using bioinformatics to generate like a sequence that can bind to the virus. Then we predict the potential siRNA using siDirect and iScore to design small RNA sequence that also bind to the HBVP gene. And then we use a alignment test using embossed needle to also make sure the sequence that we generate bind perfectly to the virus and can potentially inhibit it. And then we test for conservancy with HBV using BLAST, then test for off-target in human, which is the off-target screen was to remove siRNAs with high complementary to coding human transcripts in order to reduce the unintended binding and silencing activity of siRNAs that affect the synthesis of crucial proteins in humans. So we wouldn't want any siRNA that harm the human cells. And also, then figures on the right is our secondary structure and also the binding sites of the siRNA that we generated. Yeah, so finding through a lot of siRNAs that we predicted, we got 4 final siRNA that passed all the filtration tests. So here's a data value of energy values for more realistic and effective binding of siRNA. So I'm going to talk about the TM value, which is to acquire an adhere and high stability of siRNA bonding. We need a recommended TM range around 30 to 60% to fit as a gene silencer and avoid the potential probability of the hairpin structure formation because it will lower the gene silencing ability, so we wouldn't want that. And the GC level content is recommended to be around 30 to 64% to more also effective binding. The MFE structure is another important indicator of strength of base pairing in seat duplex complex, which give a strong stable seat duplex binding if the MFE percent is high. So we have the siRNA I-score 3 and siRNA score 9 with a really high percentage of MFE. And then the last one is the free energetic thermodynamic ensemble. Yeah, so this research is completely computer-based. So further study and research experiments are needed to solidify our suggestions of these suitable and effective siRNAs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, May, for that. I think, again, just loved the big breakdown and how, since most of us were not really sure about this topic, you still went through all the terms with us and really broke down what each of your finding meant. So thank you so much for sharing. Next, we have Adi, who's going to talk to us a bit about numerical integration methods. Over to you, Adi.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Adi, and today I'm going to present my research question, which my mentor, Mr. Joe Isaacs, and I have researched, which is determining the effect of different order Runge-Kutta numerical integration methods on the accuracy of a planetary antibody simulation. This research question has a lot of terminology, so to go a little bit more in depth on what those mean, the Runge-Kutta integration method described in the research topic refers to the explicit Runge-Kutta family of integration methods described by the following formula, where the BI and KI terms describe which integration method from the family is being used. This family includes the forward Euler integration method and the RK4 integration method, which are the 2 integration methods that are being analyzed in my research paper. The forward Euler integration method has an order of 1, whereas the RK4 integration method has an order of 4, where the order of the RK integrator describes the depth or number of steps for integration, pretty much how many sums are in the sum from the formula. A planetary n-body simulation, which is being used in my topic, it describes a planetary bodies at scale following Newton's universal law of gravitation. The simulation that I created with my mentor had the planets all the way from the sun all the way up to Jupiter. To determine the accuracy of this simulation, which is proportional to the size. Yeah, could you go back, please? Thank you. To determine the accuracy simulation, the accuracy simulation is the same, is proportional to the accuracy of the numerical integration approximation. And both of these scale with the size of the time step h, which directly is proportional to the varying term within the formula. So this proposes the research question of how does the accuracy of the simulation improve with the order of the Runge-Kutta integrators? Next slide, please. Thank you. So to experimentally determine the accuracy of this n-body simulations, the first step in this process was to create a unity simulation from which the algorithms, the RK algorithms, could be implemented. Then, by varying the time steps between runs of this simulation, we were able to collect the data on the average difference in distance between each simulation. And then, to analyze this data, the data was exported from the simulation and visualized into graphs, which represented the relationship between this average difference in distance, in some ways the error data of the simulation, and the size of the time step within the simulation. A stable time step was also produced to act as the endpoint for our data collection and as another method to determine the accuracy of the simulation. This section also explores the limitations and extensions that can arise from this experiment, which will be explored in our findings. Next slide, please. So what did we actually find? On the right are the two raw data graphs that were produced from the simulation. The top one is the Ford-Euler method graph, and the bottom is the Runge-Kutta method graph. The linear trend lines seen on these graphs demonstrate the determined path that the relationship between the error and the time step should have taken. It can be visually and numerically seen that the RK4 integration method was much more accurate and much less varied from this trend line than the Ford-Euler method. This could also be seen due to the fact that the RK4 simulations had a 4 times higher stable time step than the Ford-Euler simulations. An important thing to note about this data, however, is that the variance for Jupiter on the RK4 graph is much higher than the Ford-Euler graph. This could be represented by the R² term being much lower than the Ford-Euler graph. This, while it's not very easily visually seen here, it is much more easily seen in a log space time step, which demonstrates the instability much better, which is not displayed here. So there were a few reasons that the variance for Jupiter may have been higher, which could be due to the large distance between Jupiter and the rest of the planetary objects, or the large mass of Jupiter. And this question arises a future research topic of how exactly the instability of the Runge-Kutta in the Runge-Kutta family increases with the order. That is all I have to share for my research topic. Thank you, Lumiere team, for providing me this opportunity to research this very interesting topic.
Thank you, Adi, for sharing. And since you've already thought of a research question, we're hoping that you will come back to pursue that as well. Thank you, Adi, for sharing once again. Next, we have Rishabh, who is going to talk about one of our everyday problems that also might have been forgotten. So Rishabh, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Rishabh Goenka. I work with my mentor, Ms. Fernanda Bolanos, on a research into soft robotics. Today, I will be presenting my paper on a tip-extending soft robot that can help reduce human risk in subterranean applications. Next slide, yeah. So the problem I identified was with the human toll on sanitation workers. From 2015 to 2020 in the US, approximately 340 people died after inhaling noxious fumes or due to other accidents in manholes. According to data from the Municipal Corporation of Delhi, around 2,400 sanitation workers in the city region died before reaching their expected retirement age in the period of from 2013 to 2017. It is an open truth that sanitation workers, especially those that work in sewers, do so at great personal risk. An example of this, in 2017, 3 sanitation workers in Florida were killed by poisonous fumes after going in for general maintenance. These stories are all too common for sanitation workers. Some background of the research I conducted. So the research topic was in the subfield of soft robotics, which is a subfield of robotics focused on the design, control, and fabrication of robots composed of compliant materials instead of rigid links. The wine robot is what I worked on specifically. It was originally developed at Stanford. It's an open source soft robot model that works on the basis of immersion that is pictured here. Immersion essentially uses air pressure and soft materials, maybe plastic or some kind of material like that, to move itself. And this allows it to be very versatile and malleable. And because of these reasons, I thought that this would be very useful for subterranean users. So the idea was to use a modified wine robot. And what I did was I built and modified a wine robot, and the diagram is pictured here. The tip of the robot was fit to have a sensor that detected noxious gases, as well as a camera. The idea was to use and deploy these wine robots for initial reconnaissance in order to limit the risk faced by sanitation workers. The experiment, also a diagram shown here, it essentially tested the wine robot in a similar environment as what could be expected in a sewer. So I conducted the experiment to test the viability in manholes, and as also to determine what material of wine robot would be best suited. I built the environment to mimic a sewer and tested different wine robots in the environment. So I tested 4 variants of my wine robot. I tested it with 4 different body materials. One was the high density polythene, HDPE. One was type 1 low density polythene, type 2 low density polythene, and flexible vinyl. I did this to determine what the ideal material of a wine robot would be, as well as if it could work realistically in the aforementioned circumstances. To go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. Right, so testing the wine robot. The wine robot was tested on the time taken to cross the 12-feet tube. And as you saw in the previous slide, the tube was fitted with obstacles. 8 trials were conducted for each of the 4 materials, and the average time taken is shown below. The data shows, the trend at least, is that the thinner and less dense the material is, it allows the robot to move more quickly through an environment for a given air pressure. Now I say air pressure because the robot essentially, as we discussed aversion earlier, it moves on a basis of a particular air pressure. So this data represents for a particular air pressure what the time taken would be and the viability of it moving in the environment. And so the experiment shows that the wine robot can effectively be used in a sewer environment. Now, further investigation would include testing the wine robot at various air pressures to indicate the ideal material. Additionally, testing the robot in actual sewers would also help flush out any issues. And that's the end of my research. Thank you so much to the Lumia team for providing this opportunity. I got to work on some topics I found very interesting. I learned a lot, and I want to say thank you to my mentor, who has been has helped me in so many ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Rishabh, also for again coming on and sharing. I think this really brought into limelight that there's a lot of hope in solving these problems that we actually oversee in our day-to-day lives. And I think, again, we really hope that this is something that you will take forward and pursue as well, and really bring out that solution for us. Awesome. And last but not least, we have Arva, who's going to talk to us about characters, interpersonal relationships, and emotional development in the fictional world. Arva, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Arva, and I was a part of Lumiere's individual research program in the December 2022 winter cohort, and I was mentored by Praise Owoyemi over the course of the program. The areas of research in my paper were a combination of psychology and literature, with my research question being, what are the ways in which a character's interpersonal relationships shape their emotional development in the fictional world? The background of my research paper is based on the key terms in my research question, and the first being interpersonal relationships. An interpersonal relationship is a social and emotional interaction between an individual and the others in their surrounding environment. Second, characters, and more specifically, fictional characters. A fictional character is an individual, animal, or object present in a work of fiction. And frequently in fictitious works, the characters generated by a creative or a group of creatives are imaginary. And third, emotional development. The study of emotional development falls under the field of psychopathology. It refers to gaining knowledge about what emotions are, why and when they occur, deciphering one's own emotions, as well as strategies to maintain their emotions. To sum up the background, an interpersonal relationship is a relationship with another person. A fictional character can be anyone or anything given a role in a work of literature, and emotional development is the understanding of your own emotions. Next slide. Thank you. In this research paper, I use the methodologies of a literature review and a case study. A literature review is a qualitative research technique which provided knowledge on the topic of emotional development, along with interpersonal relationships and other affecting factors in the focus field of psychopathology. Primarily, 15 published research papers, along with others but less in-depth, were used in the literature review to understand the impact of the factors that affected an individual's emotional development, and therefore apply this to a fictional character. The case study methodology is a qualitative research technique as well, which helped in the in-depth analysis of a fictional character. This includes their interpersonal relationships and other factors, and the extent of their impact on the character's emotional development. The case studied in this paper was Flint Lockwood, a fictional character from the animated film Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And at first glance, I observed that Flint has faced childhood trauma and difficulty in forming interpersonal relationships in childhood and adolescence. So in comparison with other options, his character seemed to be an appealing case to study in depth. So essentially, I used two qualitative research techniques, a literature review, which helped me understand, compare, and contrast existing knowledge of psychopathology, and a case study, which helped me deconstruct a fictional character by applying those understandings from the literature review. The findings from my review were that the quality of an individual's interpersonal relationships can depend on emotion regulation, personality traits, childhood trauma, culture, and their surrounding environments. Writers and other creatives possess higher levels of openness and neuroticism, which are a part of the big 5 personality traits, compared with the general population. This suggests that they have a higher perception of diverse experiences and a greater ability to incorporate parts of that into their work. And lastly, Flint Lockwood's emotional development and formation of interpersonal relationships along the storyline are both factors that impacted each other, which showed that despite segregating his psychopathology into the factors that I listed a second ago, there is quite a bit of overlap, and all of which affects his emotional arc. So the gist of the findings is that the development and nurturing of an interpersonal relationship most likely depends on other intersecting psychopathological factors. These real-world understandings can apply to the fictional world as well, and since creatives tested higher in openness and neuroticism, they're more apt to bring that into their work. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to the Lumiere team for giving me the platform to research this topic.
Thank you, Arva, for sharing. Just by the way, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is my favorite movie, so I never really looked at Flint's character that way, but I think moving forward, I'm pretty sure all of us are going to look at fictional characters with just a bit more curiosity in terms of their emotions as well. So thank you, Arva, for sharing. Awesome. So for everybody here, this was our last presentation, but just wanted to also mention that this was just a piece of what our cohort has been made of. And I think on behalf of the team and all the program managers, we have had the amazing opportunity to have worked with all of you. And it is unfortunate that this journey is going to come to an end, but we really, really hope that you will continue this endeavor of research and push through all these other questions and research topics that you are passionate about. So thank you again for everybody who's presented so far. Dhruva, over to you.
I think you really put it so well, Nandini. I'm leaving this evening feeling inspired and excited for all of your research and all of our research journeys. I hope that you're able to take this forward in some way or the other, and that you're also able to continue engaged with the Lumiere community. We always love to say that once you're a Lumiere alumnus, you're a Lumiere alumnus for life. So please do keep us updated. We will reach out to you over and over again to ask you about your successes, what you're up to, and of course, in the future, to try and put you in touch with other Lumiere alumni who might be doing amazing things in your area. So congratulations once again. This is such an impressive achievement from every single one of you. Thank you and welcome to the Lumiere family.